Right, welcome back. I'm Haley here with Kim, and today we're going to talk about vacancy. So, Kim, you've mentioned before that landlords almost always underestimate what it actually costs them. And why is that?
Because the visible cost, lost rent is just the beginning. When you add everything up, the number is almost higher, always higher than the owners expected.
Okay, so walk me through the full picture. What are we actually counting for a vacancy?
So there's several layers. Each one has a real dollar amount attached to it. Let's start with lost rent. Every day is empty. Your mortgage, insurance, taxes keep running with no income to offset them. And that's just the floor, not the ceiling.
So, yeah, what's the next layer?
Turnover costs. When a tenant leaves, there's almost always work to be done cleaning, painting, carpet, minor repairs. A light turnover might run about $500. A heavy one could be $3 to $5,000 or more, depending on the age of the property.
Wow, yeah. And that's coming out of the owner's pocket?
Unless the deposit covers it, and often doesn't. So you really need to take into consideration normal wear and tear and how long a resident has lived in the unit. So if they've lived there 10 years, your carpet's probably exceeded its useful life and paint needs to be done. So it definitely could be coming out of owner's pocket.
And I know we're talking in the lens of residential, but just with my experience with commercial tenants too, turning over could mean you're negotiating a new build out. So what else is there that you see for vacancy costs?
So, marketing costs. So, your own time, if you're self managing, to do those showings, to do the screening of the tenants, the applications. There's several sites now that cost money. A big one is apartments.com and Zillow, where you go to list your units. And those cost money now. So even if you're not doing paid advertising, just your time is a big marketing cost.
Yeah. Is there any other costs?
Yes. So the cost of a rush tenant placement. So if you are just very anxious to get somebody in and not have this vacancy, you're anxious to fill the unit quickly. Sometimes you're lowering your screening standards, and a bad tenant is far more expensive than a short vacancy or even a long vacancy.
Sure. Yeah. Implications down the road, which connects back to our episode that we had about screening and placement.
Exactly. That's where cutting corners shows up in the numbers.
So, how do you minimize the gap between tenants? When should that process start or what does that look like?
Great question. So we start that process before the tenant even moves out. So you're getting key insight. If your lease requires 30 or 60-day notice, use every day of that window. So again, follow what your jurisdiction says regarding notice provisions, and then make sure that you're using that full time available to you.
Yeah. So, how does that look practically if you're looking 30, 60 days out? What kind of the steps for that?
Yeah, so first reach out early. Is a renewal possible? So negotiate with the current resident. If they're a good tenant, you know, I always suggest to meet in the middle. Like, don't just bump them up to market. And then on top of that, there are state and local laws regarding how much you can raise rents, but a renewal with a good tenant is always the first choice here at Landmark. So if they are going to move, nail down the exact move out date and then explore whether you can schedule showings before they leave. Our lease does allow that. So we start showing units while the unit is still occupied, making sure that you're communicating that to the current residents, giving them the proper notice to be able to do a showing. And so showing an occupied unit is pretty normal and most of the time legal with proper notice.
Okay. So, does that work well showing an occupied unit?
Yeah, so often it's even better than empty if the tenants are clean and tidy and have a nice space. So, an occupied unit with furniture, it shows better than an empty white box at times. And so it signals that it's desirable. Somebody's living there right now. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I could totally understand that. Getting photos, people have a hard time visualizing things sometimes. So, yeah, seeing it like you said, occupied makes it desirable. Oh, someone's just moving out. It hasn't been
Yeah.
sitting.
Yeah.
So what about turnover itself?
Plan ahead, have your vendors lined up before the unit's even vacant. So if you're showing the unit, you've been in it, you can see, hey, does the carpet need to be replaced? Is there a lot of things hanging on the walls? Am I going to have to paint? So just planning ahead with our apartment complexes, like we have paint codes on file, we might have extra
Mhm.
paint already at the building, but just planning ahead. If we know what day the tenant is moving out, then we plan, one day to go do the inspection. We do video walkthroughs and then record everything as well. You can just pre-line up your cleaners, your maintenance.
Mhm.
Every unnecessary day of downtime has a cost. So a lot of owners are scrambling to find vendors after the fact, and you can easily lose a week or two by doing that. So if you can plan ahead, that'll save you time.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. What about, we're talking about turning over, getting it ready. Let's move on to like pricing strategy and market timing. Can a misplaced rent cause unavoidable vacancy?
Absolutely. So sometimes landlords want to hold out for a rate that the market won't support. The math is really worth understanding here.
Yeah. So let's just break that down. What
Okay,
that cost
so
look
let's
like.
use the example that the market rent is 1,200, you're asking 1,300. So hold out for that extra $100 costs you 1,200 a month and a
Mm.
vacancy. So you'd need to hold that tenant for a full year just to break even on 1 month of it sitting empty. So
Mm.
in most cases, the math doesn't work.
Yeah. So how do you know what the market actually is?
Yeah, so I would recommend doing just like we do. You got to look at your comps in the area. So Zillow, apartments.com, Craigslist are highly popular in our area. Those are all national sites. So what are similar units renting for? How fast are they moving? Definitely look around, like if you have a single family home, are there other rentals in the area? Have you seen those signs up for a long time? Check your local property management companies as well for comparables. A listing that's up for 60 days tells you something. In our market today, we have fairly low vacancy rates. So an application in 3 days tells you something else.
Sure. What about time of the year? Does that matter?
Yes, significantly. So spring and summer are peak rental seasons in most markets. November and December vacancies take longer to fill. You have holidays. In our area, the weather can turn sour. You can have a lot of snow, so people don't want to be moving during dangerous road conditions. And if you can time your lease renewals to end in spring, you'll have a much easier time.
Mm.
It's just like the sales market. Like people list their houses for sale as well, spring and summer. So follows the same cycle.
Yeah, yeah. And a good tip for planning ahead, even if you have to push it a couple extra months just to try to end in that cycle. Vacancy feels passive. The unit is just sitting there, but there's actually a lot an owner can be doing to shorten it.
Yeah, I would say that that is the majority of the disconnect that we see when we take over properties that were previously self-managed
Mhm.
is the landlord is just waiting until the tenant moves out to even get in the unit, to look at it, to decide what they're going to rent it. So all of those strategies really should happen on the front end. So the owners who minimize their vacancy, they aren't lucky, they're prepared, they have good habits and systems, make all the difference.
Yeah, I like that. You're not lucky, you're prepared, you're looking ahead, planning ahead. And it seems to pay off when you do that for sure.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks, Kim, for breaking that down for us. The real cost on a vacant unit. I'm Haley.
And I'm Kim, and we'll see you next time.